We, as a congregation, are in the process of recovenanting. What does that mean? Well, the covenant is the promises we make to one another. As a congregation that is held together not by creed or what we expect you to believe, but by the promises we hold with each other. Our covenant is a deeply important document for us as a congregation. We read our abridged covenant every Sunday morning during our service. Last Sunday, we read our full covenant as we welcomed 10 new members, because these are the promises we make to each other. And as new people join us, they too are promising these things, and we are promising them back. Now, what I always think is important to remember about covenant is that it is an aspiration, and often it will include a way to come back into covenant when it's broken, because the assumption is that it will be broken. We are imperfect humans, after all. Our current covenant states that we will call each other lovingly back into the circle of covenant when necessary. Well, what exactly that means isn't clear. There is an assumption that we will stray from the covenant, and that when we do, instead of being cast aside, we will be drawn back in to the circle of love. Now, of course, we as a community might have things that might happen that make it difficult to call somebody back into covenant, a major betrayal of trust, for example, but honestly, those may be few and far between. Mostly, we are human, which means we are messy and imperfect, and sometimes that means we rub up against another, or misunderstand each other, or miss something we should have noticed, or even respond to emails before making sure we've eaten. I can't be the only one who gets hangry. Our current covenant has in it to deal with disagreements constructively and to communicate with each other in a direct, caring, and responsible manner, as a way for us to understand how we are to be with each other in the moments when we might disagree. Now, I think it's important for us to remember that conflict isn't bad. It's a part of any relationship, be it a relationship of two people. I love that, Scarlett. You tell us. That's our child that was dedicated this morning, sharing her opinions. I love that. Be it a relationship of one between two people or 110 people. But sometimes, often, even when we bring our imperfect selves to conflict, enacting our anxieties and fears and childhood trauma on each other, rather than truly listening to others and understanding that the differences we bring and what they are and why we bring them. But ideally, a covenant offers us a way to deal with those differences and for us to move beyond those slights and recognize that we aren't perfect and that we will, by design, screw it up, and that despite it all, there is still grace. Grace is a Christian concept about God having universal love and acceptance of humanity, including those who sin. I think we can apply this grace to each other, despite our differences and our beliefs about God, in our understanding that there is a universal dignity to all of humanity, including when we mess up. So all of this recognizes the fact that we are not perfect. As we've been working on this process of covenant with each other, which, by the way, has been a very imperfect process, we had hoped to already have a covenant by now, and we don't. Imperfect. As we've been working on this process, the board members and I have had the opportunity to have listening circles with many of you in the congregation to help us to understand what it is our members feel that they can bring to this congregation and what it is that they feel that they can promise with each other. And one of the things that has surfaced again and again was this idea of authenticity, not perfection. That here we strive for authenticity, not perfection. It was right up there with the idea that children are always welcome and the noises they make are sacred and holy, as one of the favorite lines of our welcome words that we say every Sunday. And, the words this year are actually, we at First Parish aren't perfect, and we don't expect you to be either. Instead, we strive for authenticity and connection. Last year's welcome words Simply said, authenticity, not perfection. And I got the idea to include this in part many years ago from a church that had an advertisement on social media which showed two young adults holding a sign in front of the church, and it said, "No perfect people allowed." Something like that. The text underneath it said something like, "There are no perfect people, only Christ is perfect." Now, this church came across my feed because it was getting dragged by my friends for its anti-LGBTQ stance. The idea that they could post such a welcoming seeming message and yet be so anti-LGBTQ was pretty offensive to many. And I knew that the only Christ is perfect part wouldn't exactly fly with us. After all, many of us, if not most of us, don't actually believe that there is such a thing as a perfect person, even if many people think that person is also a God. But that idea of no perfect people, now that was a compelling idea for church. We are not perfect, and we don't expect you to be either. We're going to be really upfront with that imperfection with you right at the top, right when you walk in. And since we're sharing that, let's get into some of our imperfections, shall we? So there's some laughter here. I'm really only going to talk about one story, but there's a lot more imperfections we can share. Since I've been here, I've seen firsthand how we aren't perfect. We've struggled to handle conflict, like the Malden Pride controversy of 2020. There's some nods. Ooh. Some people know about it, some people don't, depending on if you were here. But you might remember that if you were here. But I'll tell you the story. Some of our members, who were also leaders of Malden Pride, the first Malden Pride that happened in Malden, opted to disinvite the mayor of Malden to the Pride celebration that was being planned, in response to some comments that he made that were in support of the police in the wake of the George Floyd murders. Now remember, this was the pandemic. Emotions were running high, and some members of that committee felt that it was the right decision to disinvite him. And others felt that it wasn't. But the decision was made quickly, and the anger on both sides was palatable. This conflict internal to that group reverberated throughout the entire church. Nobody really acted perfectly. I certainly didn't. I mean, how are we supposed to talk about such an emotionally charged subject at such an emotionally charged time when we weren't even able to be in the same room as each other? So we held some online restorative circles about it, and people were able to hear different perspectives on the conflict. Now, Malden Pride was, and certainly now is, a separate organization, kinda. But the fact that it had been begun by members of the congregation and organized within the congregation made it hard to separate, because it wasn't clear, even to me, even to the members of the committee, how separate it was. Was it a committee of the church, or was it something completely different? Some were not able to get over this and left the church at that time, feeling that the name of the congregation had been soiled in the public square. I received many an angry email and phone call, despite not being the one who made this decision. People who weren't even part of the Pride Committee called each other and angered each other. But many, many more stayed, chose to remain in relationship with those who might believe different things about the relationships of the police to the community, or even just how those specific feelings about the mayor should be handled. We learned a lot. The biggest thing I thought was how hard it is to arbitrate a conflict over social media posts that flamed up and prevented us from truly seeing each other amidst our differences. Or how we shouldn't rush to decisions if we can help it. Or how, as we grow larger, sometimes people leave over conflict. It was hard, and none of us acted perfectly, least of all me, who shied away from the conflict more than I should have. But hey, the mayor of Malden was mad at me. Because even to the city, the relationship between Malden Pride and the church wasn't clear. So that wasn't my favorite phone call to have. But we got through it. We did move on. We were able to come together as the pandemic ended and recognize that a group of 100 people couldn't necessarily all believe the same things, but we could love each other anyways. That conflicts were going to happen, and disagreement about the direction we should go on a particular issue would as well. But how we treat each other when we have conflict and difference and disagreements as humans and members of a community working for love and justice in our world, that matters. And though we handled it imperfectly, we did come through to the other side of that conflict, of the pandemic, and emerged as a congregation more ready to take risks, more prepared to engage on difficult topics, and more willing to express our love for each other despite differences. Friends, as our congregation blossoms again, growing in size in a way that is so exciting and encouraging, we are again at the precipice of high tensions and emotions with a threatening government, and varying levels of engaging with that reality, from fear to activism to disengagement. All of us just trying to survive under this regime. And we are taking this time to rewrite our covenant, which will not be perfect, but it will be messy and real, just like us. Perhaps there is no better time to remind us how to be together. A few weeks ago, our social action team distributed a statement regarding ending the genocide in Palestine. And we did it without first having had the opportunity to have conversations about how we might all feel and be impacted by what's happening. And what we know is that we should be having conversations about how we feel about this. And I want to apologize myself for not encouraging discussions first, because we have an opportunity to make a statement that helps us to take a stance on one of the most consequential issues of our time. And as your minister, I should have foreseen that some conversation first would have been a good idea. But I am imperfect, and it was a draft, one of many that we can put forward. And we will take the time to discuss what kind of statement we want to make, if any. And that statement, it will be imperfect, but hopefully, if we do it right, it will be authentic to who we are. Now, part of why I bring this up today, this specific topic of the genocide, is that it's Mother's Day. And Mother's Day was originally tied to the idea that women should unite for peace around the world. How many people know this origin of Mother's Day? Only a few, right? Julia Ward Howe, one of our Unitarian ancestors, wrote an appeal to womanhood in 1872 in relation to the American Civil War and the Franco-Prussian War, which is what eventually led to the holiday of Mother's Day. She originally wanted it to be Mother's Day of Peace, as opposed to the way we think about Mother's Day today. She wrote an appeal, and it's actually in that gray hymnal in your pews if you want to look at it, number 573. I don't have time to read it to you today, but it talks about an appeal to peace. Right? It's an important plea for peace. And it's imperfect. The Civil War, in that it ended slavery, might have been a just war. But Julia Ward Howe didn't necessarily see it as okay to let people be killed in the service of a greater goal. Mother's Day today isn't celebrated as a call to peace around the world. Today, you will see few people connecting what's happening in Palestine, where children are being cut off from food and assistance, or to even what's happening in Ukraine. Few people will see these connections with Mother's Day. Instead, you'll see a Hallmark holiday where mothers are celebrated, to be sure, as they should be, but celebrated often in a superficial way that hopes to see this one day a year make up for the fact that 364 other days of the year, we expect perfection from mothers. We really do. From TikToks and social media posts to shaming for too much screen time or not putting your kids in the right school or summer camp, mom guilt is real. How we expect women to be mothers, therapists, social workers, activity coordinators, house cleaners, cooks, and so many other things if they have kids is beyond me. But here, Julia Ward Howe even adds activist to that. Unless you think women without kids are exempt, the expectations that to be a mother is the purpose of being a woman is baked into our culture. The idea of perfection is inattainable and impossible for mothers or any other women or any other people to attain. And so I hope this goes without saying, Allison, Scarlett's mom, we are here for you and we don't expect you to be perfect. You either, Tim. And perhaps most importantly, we don't expect you, Scarlett, to be perfect either. Friends, what I am trying to get out here today is that we each have so much on our plate. Perhaps you are struggling with chronic disease or anxiety and depression, and it's all you can do to be here today. Or you're figuring out your place in the resistance, or you're trying to be the best parent you can. And we will all always fall short of what we hope. And church, it needs to be a place where we can fall short sometimes, where the messiness of trying to figure out how to be the people we want to be sometimes bumps up against the reality that we can't be perfect, that we are each learning and ever lovingly calling each other back into the circle. And what Brené Brown teaches us from our reading is that in order to be able to live into that imperfection, we have to believe that we are already enough, to be vulnerable with each other, and to have compassion to know that we have made it through hard times before. And we will do that together as we navigate what it is to be in community with each other, as we change and grow and figure out what our new covenant will be like, and figure out what we will do with our old building, and figure out what we will say about Gaza, and figure out what we will do about any of the other issues that are presented to us in this time. We will do it imperfectly, but we will do it with courage, with vulnerability, and love. We will do it authentically, but not perfectly. May it be so, and let us say together, Amen. Amen.